This is Azerbaijani Odlar Yurdu Radio 102.7 FM CFRO Vancouver Co-op Radio Station.
Vancouver şehri.
This is 102.7 FM CFRO Vancouver Co-op Radio Station, Azerbaijani radio program, and my name is Ayub Hajiyev, and I will be your host today until 5 p.m. As usual, we have prepared very interesting program dedicated to Khojaly massacre, the mass killing of Azerbaijani civilians by the Armenian militants in 1992 in the town of Khojaly. It has been exactly 20 years since the massacre of large number of civilians in small town called Khojaly in Azerbaijan. Every year on February 26, Azerbaijanis across the world mark this day as a day of genocide committed against Azerbaijanis. However, for Azerbaijan, the wounds of Khojaly are much deeper than tragic death of civilians. For Azerbaijanis, Khojaly is atrocity waiting for justice. It was a day of disgrace for dignity of every Azerbaijani. It was when pride of Azerbaijanis as a nation was defeated. Traditionally, Azerbaijanis were always proud of their ability to stand up for weak and to protect families and homes. In Khojaly, it was all shattered. On February 26, 1992, exactly 20 years ago, Azerbaijanis failed to protect their women from being raped by the Armenian militants and children from being brutally slaughtered. But perhaps it was due to Azerbaijani way of thinking that they mostly blamed themselves for not being able to protect the civilians rather than accusing those who committed the crime. About a week after the massacre, the first president of newly established Azerbaijan Republic resigned from his position, taking the blame for not being able to protect Azerbaijani civilians in Khojaly. Even the final report by the Azerbaijani government's investigative commission put more blame on Azerbaijani officials for not being able to act rather than focusing on Armenian militants who committed the crimes. But as every story, the massacre of Azerbaijani civilians in Khojaly does have two sides. No matter how hard you blame Azerbaijani government for not being able to protect civilians, the real crime was committed by the militants and those Armenian leaders who were overseeing the invasion to Khojaly. Nothing, absolutely nothing, can justify killing of more than 600 civilians, including 106 women and 83 children. According to most recent government figures, the fate of 150 civilians, women and children are still unknown. It's been 20 years. Last time when I was in Azerbaijan, I traveled to a small remote village called Aljakand in Azerbaijan, where many survivors of Khojaly massacre live. It took me 5 hours to drive to get there. At first glance, the town and people are no different from any other ordinary mountain town in Azerbaijan. Dusty gravel roads, old walls separating houses, cattle and sheep on the street, and local hospitality specific to mountain people. I went to the town center and explained to them my mission and told them that I would like to speak to some survivors of the Khojaly and hear their stories firsthand. As soon as you speak about Khojaly in Aljakant, everyone's mood changes. People here are traumatized by the events. Khojaly is not the past but hidden present here. In Aljakant, every family has lost someone among close friends and relatives during the massacre. They told me that when they see other survivors, they try not to speak about the events to each other as it opens unhealed wounds. I was even feeling a bit guilty for making them to speak. Among all stories that I heard, story of the one survivor, Khumar Salimova, touched me the most. Khumar was only 19 years old when it all happened. She was the only survivor from the family, and now she lives alone.
25'indən 26'sına keçən gecə biz evdəydik, ailəvi. Hamımız bir yerdəydik. Saat 15 olar təqribən. Həmin vaxtı bizi atışma, bizi hər tərəflərində elə bir alacan tipli raketa var. Ondan bizə əvvəlcə...
On the night of February 25th to 26th in 1992, I was at home with my family in Khojaly village located in the Karabakh region of Azerbaijan. I was there with my parents and my 3 most beloved brothers. At around 11 o'clock at night, the town came under heavy bombardment. It was dark and we had no idea where to escape. When we exited our house, the town was already on fire. We decided to run towards the hills on the side of our town and wait there until the bombardment ended. While walking towards the hill, we realized that Armenians were already in the town and there was no way to go back. We decided to continue on our way and try to escape to Agdam, the next major populated Azerbaijani town. There were a large group of people with us, lots of children, women, men, and the elderly. We walked the entire night. Towards the early morning, we ended up in an ambush of Armenian militants. The bullets started raining from all directions and tank shells started exploding. Everyone panicked. We had no idea where to run to save our lives. At one point, we realized that we had no place to run and the approaching Armenian militants would catch us very soon. My younger brother turned his gun at me and told me that he would have to kill me. He did not want me to end up a captive in the hands of Armenian soldiers. I was scared. I gathered all my strength and told him to do it if he had to, that he should kill me. I would rather die than be a captive at the hands of the Armenian militia. For me, it was a matter of honor and dignity. But my dad ran in front of him. He asked my brother to put his gun down. Then my dad told me to run towards the Azerbaijani town and try to survive. I ran as fast as I could. Imagine, 19 years old, running for my life in the middle of the forest amongst dead and wounded bodies. I was so scared. I was just running, and I had no idea where I was going. Suddenly a grenade or a tank shell exploded close to me. I fell. At first I did not realize what had happened. I tried to stand up and continue running, only to realize that I was not able to move at all. I was seriously wounded. I was laying on the ground and could hear approaching Armenian voices. I was scared and tried to keep silent. But a bit later, I was surrounded by Armenian soldiers. I started begging them not to take me captive, but to kill me there. They wanted to take me, but as I could not walk due to the wounds, someone had to carry me. First they dragged me by pulling on my hair. It was too hard, so they brought a captive Azerbaijani soldier and demanded he carry me. The soldier first lifted me from the ground, but then he recognized me. He was a guy from my neighborhood in Khojaly. He put me down on the ground and told his captives that they could kill him, but he would not carry me. As there was no one else to carry me, the soldiers decided to play around with me. I was bleeding heavily, but they did not care. They were telling me that they would kill all Azerbaijanis in Karabakh until there was none left. One of them even brought binoculars and put them to my eyes and asked me to look how they were killing the remaining Azerbaijani citizens trying to escape. It was dark, but I could see how they were shooting at children, shooting at women and the elderly. That is all I remember. I lost consciousness at that point. I do not remember the rest. I woke up a while later. I was in the middle of the forest surrounded by dead bodies. I tried to crawl around, but I was weak and could not move far. I heard someone moaning close to me. I started crawling towards the sound. I found a young man who was lying in a pile of blood. He was asking for water. For some reason, finding this guy alive gave me some hope, as if he was going to help me somehow. I grabbed handfuls of snow from the ground and squeezed some water into his mouth. The guy loudly took his last breath and he died. It has been almost 20 years since it happened, but the sound of his last breath is still in my ears as if it just happened. I can never forget that sound. I never knew who that guy was, but the sound of his last breath makes me cry almost every day. He was my last hope amongst the hundreds of dead bodies, and he died in front of my eyes. I cried and I closed his eyes with my hand. I lay next to his body and tried to gather all my strength and not to die. After a while I started hearing Azerbaijani voices. I could not see anyone, but I could hear their voices clearly. I gathered all my remaining strength and called for help. They were Azerbaijani soldiers coming from Agdam trying to collect the dead bodies and find the wounded. Several of them ran to me and took me to the nearest hospital. In hospital, I realized that I was the only survivor amongst the large group of people who had left my town with me. No one from my family had made it. My father, my mother, and my 3 brothers were all killed by Armenian militants.
Sonra Azərbaycanlılar gəldilər də, deyirsiniz ki, o meyitlərin arasını tapdılar da.
Hə, gəlib məni tapdılar, vəziyyətim ağır idi o vaxtı. Yəni, ən ağır yaralı Khojalydan çıxan mən olmuşam və ən faciəli ailəsi də olan mən. İndi bax, tək-tənha yaşayıram. Nə atam yox, nə qardaşlarım yox, nə anam yox. Deyir, görəsən bu niyə təpə yaşayım?
While in hospital, many Azerbaijani investigators and some journalists came to interrogate me. I told them everything that I saw. I even gave them the names of many Armenian soldiers that were there. That day took everything from my life. Now I live in this town alone. I have no one, no family. I work as a caregiver in a local kindergarten. I still cannot understand why this all happened. We never had anything against the Armenians. As children, our parents taught us not to hate. We never learned to hate anyone, including Armenians. Instead, we always looked at them as cousins. I still cannot understand the hatred that those soldiers had towards us. They had one intention, to scare us so all Azerbaijanis would leave Karabakh. Each time I talk about what happened, it reopens my wounds. I end up living through those moments over and over and over again, and it is not pleasant. However, I have a strong desire inside me for justice. I cannot be silent. I speak out. I want those who committed the massacre of civilians in Khojaly to be served justice. We have seen many wars where people fight and die but do not lose their dignity. I cannot say the same about my captives. Killing children and raping women is not something that can be tolerated. I certainly did not deserve that torture and inhumane treatment. They treated us all inhumanely, and they need to be held accountable. Otherwise, crimes like this will continue to happen.
nə qədər olmaya qadına əl qaldırmaq heç düzgün deyil. Düşmənin də olsa, şəxsən mənim qardaşlarım onu eləməzdi. Amma onlar ki, mənim saçımdan sürtüyüb ki, dartırdı, elə pis sərt sözlər işlədirdilər ki, onlar mənə keçəni.
This was a story of a survivor from Khojaly village in Azerbaijan who lost her entire family exactly 20 years ago on February 26, 1992 and survived by a mere chance. Khumar's story touched me deeply. I could not hold my tears. To me, it was a story right from the science fiction literature or a history books. I could not believe that at the end of the 20th century, this could happen to someone. I was also astonished by the bravery of a 19-year-old girl who was ready to die but not to end up captive on the hands of people who killed her entire family. Khojaly for her is not the past but the present and the future. As many other survivors, Khumar lives through these events every day. What makes things much worse for people like Khumar and millions of other Azerbaijanis that the massacre in Khojaly has never received adequate international attention, and the people who committed the crime have never been punished. The Armenian government continued denying its involvement in Khojaly massacre. It may be even naive to expect that the current government of Armenia will ever act to hold criminals accountable, as the current president of Armenia, Serge Sarkisyan, was the person overseeing the operation in Khojaly. Once even Sarkisyan accepted his involvement in the massacre. In his interview with a prominent journalist, Thomas de Waal, in 2000, he even tried to justify the killing of civilians by stating that, I'm gonna cite, before Khojaly, the Azerbaijanis thought that they were joking with us. They thought that Armenians were people who could not raise their hands against the civilian population. We were able to break that stereotype, and that's what happened. This was a citation from the current president of Armenia. Last week, another survivor from Khojaly, a young 20-year-old woman, Zarifa Guliyeva, wrote a letter to Armenian President Serge Sarkisyan. Zarifa was born shortly after the Khojaly massacre. During the events, she lost 22 members of her family, her young brother, grandmother, uncle and father. Her pregnant mother was heavily wounded and barely survived. Let's listen to some parts from the letter.
My name is Zarifa. I am an Azerbaijani woman from the ghost town of Khojaly in Karabakh. I'm sure you are aware that Khojaly is a town where on the 26th of February 1992, as a result of monstrous crimes carried out by the occupying Armenian forces, 613 people were killed and more than 1,275 taken prisoner. 150 people went missing and 487 people became disabled. If you have any doubts about the choice of words to describe such a crime against humanity, then I'll tell you that Khojaly is a sister town of the Czech town Lodz, which during the Second World War was almost entirely wiped out by the Nazi Germans. May I also remind you that international advocacy organization Human Rights Watch described the tragedy in Khojaly as the largest massacre of the Armenian-Azerbaijani conflict over Karabakh. According to this watchdog organization, Armenian armed forces were directly responsible for the deaths of civilians. 20 years have passed since this heinous crime, a genocide against Azerbaijanis. 20 years. This is how old I am. Zarifa, a native of Khojaly. Almost my entire family was killed in Khojaly. My young brother, grandmother, uncle, a total of 22 members of my family. My family was brought up by my mother. She raised us and gave us the most important thing in life, love for my country and an understanding of the value of human life. These values are given to us by a woman whose 4 bullets and shrapnel wounds serve as a daily reminder of the actions of Armenian occupying forces. These pieces of shrapnel live in all of us people of Khojaly, reminding us of the horrors of that night, the massacre committed by Armenian militants. I know that you have 2 daughters, Anush and Satnik. They are future mothers. Now, ask yourself and your daughters, what was the fault of those 106 women and 63 children killed by Armenian fascists in Khojaly? Would you or your daughters want someone from their family or their friends to live through such a horrible fate? I'm just asking you to acknowledge the responsibility of the Armenian side for perpetrating genocide of Azerbaijani civilians in Khojaly. This step could be a radically new chapter in the settlement of Armenian-Azerbaijani conflict over Karabakh. This move would be a good start to recreating the atmosphere of trust between our countries and nations that was destroyed by the killers of the people of Khojaly. I am confident that the world will give a fair assessment of the genocide of Azerbaijani citizens in Khojaly. Likewise, I'm sure there is no eternal conflict, and that the neighboring nations sooner or later will live in peace and mutual trust, but it is up to you to see whether it happens because of your participation. Only you can decide either to go down in history as a politician who is able to accept responsibility for his own mistakes and those of his people, and helped bring justice and peace between our nations, or someone who feared to acknowledge the crime and rather preferred not to speak loudly about these things.
This was a letter from a survivor of Khojaly massacre, committed 20 years ago, on February 26, 1992, by the Armenian forces. The letter was sent several days ago to the current president of Armenia, Mr. Serge Sarkisyan, who was directly responsible for the massacre and who have acknowledged the participation in the events. The letter was written by 20 years old Zarifa Gloeva, whose mother was pregnant and who received many bullet wounds and shrapnel wounds during the events. She is one of the many Azerbaijanis still waiting for justice of the massacre that happened 20 years ago.
On behalf of Odlar Yurdu Radio, we would like to thank Rebecca Lee for helping us to prepare the program.
This is Azerbaijani Odlar Yurdu Radio 102.7 FM CFRO Vancouver Co-op radio station.